on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
My guest today is Brent Wilson, who's a producer, writer, director of Streetlight Harmonies, which is a fabulous new documentary. Welcome, Brent.
Hi, Jan. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate it very much.
Oh, I'm very excited to talk to you about this documentary. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about your background, because you have had just an amazing background. Tell me how you got started in this business and what led you up to start doing documentaries.
Well, I grew up, a child of the 80s, Jan, and I think like so many kids, so many filmmakers, growing up in that era, I got the bug from Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Those were that generation of filmmakers where, we saw those films and we came out of the theaters and we realized that, we too could make movies. It didn't seem like this kind of forbidden art form, this thing that was so far away. And I'll never forget receiving a Boy's Life magazine, the Boy Scout magazine, and there was an interview with Steven Spielberg, and I thought, okay, that's what a director does. And, they were showing him on his bike in his Amblin offices with his video games. And I remember thinking at like 11 or 12 years old, it's like, well, that's what I want to do. And so I had a little dirt bike, sold my little dirt bike, bought a video camera, and started making movies. And I've been very fortunate, very blessed that I've actually been able to do that ever since. I started on that path and began as a PA, right out of school, working my way up the ladder. And around 25 or 26, started a production company and started to produce and direct my own production. So for me, it's been one of those things where I was very fortunate and very blessed to be able to know what I wanted to do and able to pursue it and to be able to do it my whole life.
That's so wonderful. I love it when you figure out at a young age what you want to do and are able to follow your passion and make it all a reality. But you started off, you were in Orlando, Florida at Disney World and Universal Studios. What did you start off doing with them?
Yeah, as I was coming out of college, there was this big movement at that time. I was talking about, in the early 90s, to mid 90s, to establish Orlando as kind of Hollywood-y. As a matter of fact, I saw an interview with Steven Spielberg on the Today Show, and he was saying, "Yep, this is going to be the new Hollywood." And I thought, I was a young guy, 19 years old, and I thought, well, that sounds like a great place to be. Be on the ground floor of something that was going to be happening. So, packed up and loaded up my car and moved to Orlando and started out again, just very much at the bottom, and started working on a lot of great Disney productions. And at that time, what was particularly great was that there was a lot of different types of productions that were going on. You could work on a commercial one day. You could work on a Disney Christmas parade the next day. You could then, work on a soap opera that was shooting, at Disney or at Universal. There's all these different types of productions, a live production, a film production, a video production, and you're able to do lots of different jobs. So you're exposed to a lot of different types of entertainment, a lot of different types of jobs, and you're able to really kind of prove yourself. And so that was a great experience. So I was able to, and I was a second AC where I loaded film, and I was a utility where I would load cameras, and I would PA and production coordinate and do a little bit of everything. And that's one of those things I think, looking back now, I think it's actually made me a better filmmaker because you are exposed to all of those different types of jobs. And one of the other things that came out of it that was, again, I think just a product of the time and the place was that there was a manager there, a gentleman named Johnny Wright of Wright Entertainment Group, who managed Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Britney Spears and all those great pop groups at the time. And as I was starting my production company, Johnny was developing these acts, and they needed music videos, they needed concert videos for these acts. And so, I spent several years, producing and directing, music videos for the NSYNC and the Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys and a lot of those things. And had a lot of fun doing those.
I was say, how fun was that?
It was a crazy time. It was like the Wild West. They would come in and, I'll never forget the first music video we did for NSYNC, and it was like a 24-hour shoot. And God, they were all just kids, and, they're 15, 16, 17 years old. And, you don't know quite what to think of it. You're just, we were all just kids. I was 25, 26, and we're just kind of making it up as we go along. And we had this incredible kind of freedom to just kind of do what we wanted to do and however we wanted to do it. And then to see those guys become these just huge megastars, seemingly overnight, was just a blast. It was certainly not anything that, I would have predicted. When we were doing those first music videos, I never thought to myself, 25 years from now, Justin Timberlake's going to be playing the Super Bowl.
Right.
I was never crazy enough to think about that. It was, and that Britney would be doing, 200 nights a year in Las Vegas.
I know.
The Planet Hollywood. It's just, we were just all kind of kids having fun and just trying to make something happen. And it was a blast. And it was a short window. It only lasted 4 years or something like that. But in that time, we did have a really good time.
And did that kind of lead you to your love of music from doing those music videos that led you to do what you're doing now with Streetlight Harmonies? I
would say I think it certainly helped. I grew up loving music. One of the things that with Streetlight Harmonies, that as Streetlight Harmonies developed, I realized that I was very fortunate in that, I grew up in an era when you were forced to listen to your parents' music. I didn't have an iPod. I didn't have, this was even before Sony Walkmans, and there was no Disney radio. So if you were in the car with your parents, you listened to what your parents wanted to listen to. There was no putting on headphones or, hey, put on the Disney radio. Or if you were at home and, on the weekends, your mom's cleaning the house, they put on their music. And in some ways, that was a tremendous, I didn't realize it at the time. That was actually a tremendous influence that I was exposed to such great music. And so, I can't carry a note in a bucket. I could, in school, in music class, I could barely play the stick, but I absolutely loved, music and loved listening to my parents' music and my uncles. And right around the late 70s, there was this great resurgence of doo-wop music, American Graffiti. As a kid, I loved the movie American Graffiti. Mm-hmm. And I remember just hearing that music going, well, that's just cool. That's better than Air Supply, or whoever was on the radio at the time. No disrespect, but I could tell at a very early age, well, that's just better. And then, of course, Happy Days came along, and Laverne and Shirley, and the movie Grease, the movie Stand By Me, and, you become exposed to this music. And I think if you had an open mind and an open ear, you could recognize pretty early on that this music was good music, and it was important music, and it was fun. And so I think I just kind of fell in love with it organically that way. And then when we did the NSYNC and then the Britney Spears, I just had a love for music, and I had a love for artists and a respect for what it takes to create, I think, any art, even including, what we were doing with those pop groups at the time.
Anybody who has ever listened to any music, this was certainly the music of the generation from the 50s and 60s background, and as you say, even in the 70s. But the music is as fresh and alive today as it ever was. I think when in watching your movie Streetlight Harmonies, which I absolutely loved, by the way, I just thought it was so well done, and we'll talk more deeply about that. But just even listening to the artists talk about how they got started, how this all came about, and it's a wonderful history of doo-wop music. But the music is as fresh today. I'm wondering why nobody is re-recording some of these today.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that was one of our goals with the film, is that we thought, if you can just get it out there, if the music can just kind of be heard, like I did when I was a kid, when I heard it, in American Graffiti. If you just hear it and you're exposed to it, you'll recognize that it's good music, that it's fresh. And that was truly one of our goals with the film. It purposely edited very quickly. I wanted the piece to move fast, so that if somebody's in their 20s or whatever, they're not bored by it. I tried to, obviously we had a lot of black and white footage, but I tried to have very colorful background so that it didn't look old. I didn't want somebody flipping through the channels and thinking to themselves, oh, this is some kind of history film. There was a conscious effort to try to keep it fresh and make it feel fresh so that you could be exposed to the music and hear the music and then recognize that, this stuff is 65 years old, but as you said, it still sounds fresh. And that truly was one of our goals going into it.
That sounds better than a lot of things that are out there today, as you just alluded to, too. We're going to take a quick break and come right back. back. You are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM, and like the Jan Price Show on Facebook, and check out thejanpriceshow.com. The Century Theater at Northridge Mall is newly remodeled with luxury loungers. Luxury loungers are electric-powered, oversized plush reclining seats with extendable footrests, cup holders, and snack tables. Reserve the best seat in town at the Century Theater at Northridge Mall.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right. It's Mr. Sandless, the no sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476. Or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Brent Wilson, who's the producer, director, and writer of this wonderful new documentary called Street Light Harmonies. So what led you, Brent, to do this documentary?
It took a couple of different steps. A few years ago, I did a documentary called The Last Reunion, A Gathering of Heroes. And it was a documentary about a gathering of World War II veterans, fighter pilots, B-51 Mustang pilots. And they were having their final reunion. And I didn't know a whole lot about World War II at that time. I was exposed to the idea of the documentary, and I just thought it was a wonderful film. And as we approached it, these gentlemen told their stories before they were passing away. These guys were all in their 80s, and I just felt like they had this wonderful story to tell. And it was a story that hadn't been told. So we really approached it with a lot of reverence. So as that happened, then about 3 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago, our fellow producer Tim Headington, who's just a lover of the arts and a lover of doo-wop music, was involved with a doo-wop album with Boyz II Men. And as they were working on that album, Tim came up with the idea to do a documentary. He goes, you know what, we're doing this album with Boyz II Men, and as we're talking about this, we've realized that nobody has really done a serious film on doo-wop. You have a lot of serious work on jazz, you have a lot of serious work on country, and of course on blues, even of course rock and roll, but nobody's tackled this. And so when Tim brought that up, my other producing partner and I, Teresa Page, we started to delve into it a little bit, and we did. We realized that Tim was right, that this is a story that hasn't been told. These men have a story to tell that goes deeper than just the music itself, and it did. It reminded me a lot of the World War II document, where, here are these artists now that are in their 70s and their 80s, and if this story isn't told now, it will never be told, because they're going to be gone, and we're losing these artists. And so that was the beginning of it. So when Tim approached the idea, the three of us with Teresa, we just dove in head first, try to capture as many of these stories as we could, literally before it was too late. And, unfortunately, some artists died before we could reach them. We had a couple of different artists who had passed away while we were waiting to interview them, including Benny King, which was a heartbreak for us. And then some artists that passed away while we were in post-production. We had some that had passed just before they could even see the film. So it ended up being, exactly what we anticipated it would be. It would be a story that needed to be told, that if it wasn't told now, we would lose this. We would lose this piece of American history. And that was how we approached it. And so we dove in, and Teresa began the process of reaching as many of these artists as we absolutely could, and including as many of them as we could in the film. And, I think we've got, 8 or 9 members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I think we did almost 40 different interviews. And if given the opportunity, man, we could have done another 40 more. We could have kept on going.
Well, it is a piece of history, and again, a couple different levels. It's not just a piece of music history, but it's also a piece of history in the sense of how I love how you weaved in the civil rights movement in the 60s, how this led up to the civil rights movement and the segregation in the South that was taking place during that time, and hearing the artist's story about, here these were artists from the North where we have not experienced the segregation, and then they have to go to the South, and it was an entirely different world for them, and the problems and the issues. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely, Jen, and you're 100% right. That was one of the first elements that we recognized, as there is so much more depth here than just the music, and so much more depth to what these men and women have done. And one of the first conclusions that we drew was that these were the seeds for the civil rights movement that was going to be coming in the mid '60s. At this time, 55, 56, you had blues that was doing, it was way at the end of the dial, and a kid, a white kid was not going to be able to hear Howlin' Wolf. They weren't going to be able to sneak off to a club, some blues club on the edge of town and hear Muddy Waters. But maybe they could hear In the Still of the Night. You know what I mean? They could hear, this kind of beautiful song. They could find this on the radio, and then maybe they could go see that show that was in town. And this is truly the first exposure that a lot of these white kids had to African American culture. This was the first time they realized that, maybe these folks aren't any different than me, and I like their music. Why wouldn't I like them? And, it's those same white kids that, 4 or 5 years later, that would be marching, that would be signing up voters, that would be voting, and would be a part of this movement that, that swept the country. And it's our contention that it was these African-American artists that planted those seeds, because up until that point, it was just pure segregation, and there was absolutely no overlap and no exposure. You had Elvis, but Elvis, was singing black music in a very, white style. But, now here are the Drifters, here are the Five Stats, and, now you're getting exposure to these artists and hopefully beginning to realize, actually they're not that much different from me, and I like their music. And of course, this doesn't change overnight, and it's in small pockets. As you said, they certainly weren't received that way in the South, but, we do like to believe that, there were pockets of people that their opinions began to turn as they were exposed to these things, and exposed to this type of music, and exposed to these artists, and just dance. As they say in the film, I think it's Leon Hughes of the Coasters, and he talks about singing to a wall, and they're not allowed to. There's a white audience on one side, and a black audience on the other side, because it's a completely segregated audience, and the promoter's telling them, we're not going to let you look these white people in the eye, so you're going to sing to the wall, and which was a common practice at the time.
Unbelievable.
And it's just remarkable when you think of it, isn't it?
It's just, yes.
To think that just, 60 years ago, 55, 60 years ago.
It's not that long ago. You're right. And what I love the scene where there's a rope separating the white audience and the black audience, and then they all started dancing. And after you go ahead and why don't you talk about it?
No, please.
Okay. They start dancing, and then all of a sudden the whites and the blacks are dancing, and the rope came down. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes, it is.
I mean,
exactly it.
And that was just like, that's when things did begin to change. People, as I said, it's a piece of music history, but it's a piece of our history too, about segregation. And I just love how you put that together. We have a small little clip from the movie. Do you want to lead us into that, Brent, before we go into the break?
Yep, absolutely. This is a clip that from the film itself, and it's Sammy Strain of Little Anthony Imperials, and it's Charlie Thomas of the Drifters, Jimmy Merchant with Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, and just kind of talking about the origins of the music and how it was born on the corners of the inner city.
When Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers jumped over that wall, I think the next day, teenage groups popped up from coast to coast.
All of a sudden, we realized that as a teenager, we can actually, maybe make a record.
Frankie Lyman was about the same age I was, so I said, if he can do it, I can do it.
They caused the epidemic. There were groups in every schoolyard. They were all over, and no matter where you went in 1956, during the summer, no matter what neighborhood, what project, you heard harmony every place you went. Boom, 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 boom. Now they often call me Speedo, but my real name is Mister.
We sing on street corners if you were a singer then you knew what I'm talking about.
Most of the time when we get together and sing, I meet you at the corner there. I see you walking up. They got me all get stopped and start singing on the corner together.
You know, a long time before I got with the Drifters, I was with the Crowns, the Five Crowns, and we used to sing on the street corner of 8th Avenue. It used to be the Cadillacs on one corner. It used to be the Five Crowns on one corner, the Hop Tones on another corner. You know, you light the fire in the garbage can, and you take a little nip or something, and then you hit a little doo-wop song.
Well, now some may call me Joe, some may call me Mo. That man Mosquito, he don't never take it slow. Well, now the uncle call me Mosquito, but my...
And this is where this whole thing called doo-wop developed in the inner city. And that, to me, is what doo-wop really is. It's a homegrown music.
You have been listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook and check out thejanpriceshow.com. The Ozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Ozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Ozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.
Have you ever dreamed of doing commercials or movies? Your dream starts with a desire. And if you have the desire to do commercials and feature films, we want to know about you. We're Moco Film, one of the Genesis companies that includes VoiceJock, a major provider of TV commercial talent to TV stations throughout the nation. Registering is free. Just go to mocofilm.com and fill out the information. That's MOCOfilm.com. You'll become part of a large talent bank available to producers. Go to mocofilm.com today and start living your dream.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Brent Wilson, who's the producer, director, and writer of Street Light Harmonies. And we were just talking a little bit about how the music revolution of the doo-wop and led into the history of segregation in the South. But also you touched a little bit on Frankie Lyman. Let's talk a little bit about him because he had such a tragic story.
Yeah, Jan, it's kind of the Big Bang is what we call it in the film. He was one of the originators. You know, Frankie was 13 years old when he recorded "Why Do Fools Fall in Love?" And as a point of reference for you, for the audience, is that when Berry Gordy was starting out, he was out looking specifically for the next Frankie Lyman, and he found that in Michael Jackson. And he had no goal other than I need to find the very next Frankie Lyman, and that became Michael. So that's who Frankie was. Frankie was the Michael Jackson of his day. And at 13 years old, he recorded "Why Do Fools Fall in Love?", which was the first time that a song was written by kids and sung by kids for kids. And to this point, Frank Sinatra is older. We talk about it, in the film a little bit, how much is that doggy in the window? And kids are being spoken down to instead of being spoken to and are sung to. And Frankie's the first one that at 13 years old is singing about being in love and what that means to a 13-year-old. And it just exploded overnight. And it was all over the New York area, of course, and they had a local television station there, the Frankie Lane Show. And as they say in the film, the entire state of New York is watching that show, and every 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid's looking at that going, well, if he can do that, I can do that. And the next day, it just exploded. And that's a ripple that, we still see today. I mean, that ripple is through, NSYNC and Justin Bieber, and One Direction, and whoever else is out there today is a direct result of that big bang from Frankie Lyman. And then, as you pointed out, Frankie was the everything to do and everything not to do. As he became incredibly popular, they cut him out from the rest of the group, isolated him from his friends, isolated him from what made him successful, and then, they fall into that tragic cycle of drugs. And Frankie died very, very young, paying a very high price for that fame. He was, of course, one of the very first artists, not one of the very first, but artists of that era to have his lyrics stolen and to have his copyright stolen. It's such a famous story that, they actually did a movie about it in the 80s called Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And with Halle Berry's in it. And it just became this tragic story. story of fame and fame too quickly, how not to handle the fame. So we touch on that. We talk about that in the film. And one of the things we always, we wanted to kind of shine a light was on the positive, right? The impact that Frankie had and just the power of that song, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, and how, if there's a kid out rapping on those corners of the street right now, it's because, of Frankie Lyman. And it is a direct link of kids, writing songs, singing songs, for other kids. And it created an entire industry. And that was where it began. And it was just such a charismatic. You don't do that without being talented, of course. And if anyone's seen the YouTube clip, I would, suggest it. The guy just had so much charisma, and just you could just see it in his eyes. He had that it factor, and unfortunately, he did. He paid a high price for that fame, and the rights were ripped off. The song was ripped off. A few years ago, Jimmy Merchant of the Teenagers, that appears on our film, and he tells the story of how those guys, those kids, would just sign anything. Nobody told them that you're signing away your right forever. Nobody told them that this song is going to be worth $1 million. You're 14, 15 years old. Maybe your parents, maybe your Jimmy Merchant's case, I believe he said his father was a janitor, and his father earned $20 a week, and now somebody's bringing them a contract and saying sign here, and we're going to pay your son $35 a week. And it was like, well, where do you sign? Because they just didn't know better, and so they're finding a way they're right, and never really truly knowing what that industry was going to be, what they were going to create, and did create $1 billion industry. And a lot of those guys, and girls, paid those costs. And that's one of the other elements that we talk about in the film. We want the film to be, the good and the bad and the ugly of the industry. And today, a lot of artists are protected and are giving opportunities to protect themselves that those guys and girls would never have the opportunity to receive. And that's one of the elements of the film we talk about these guys well, that they were trailblazers, and that Justin Bieber is not going to get ripped off the way Frankie Lyman got ripped off because of the trail that Frankie Lyman had blazed.
We've heard so many of these kinds of stories where, fame comes too fast and then they burn out so quickly. And, we think we would learn those lessons, but apparently we haven't, because there's still the same thing goes on today. But as far as, ripping them off, yes, you're right. They were the trailblazers. What was interesting for me was so many of these performers were very young. I mean, they were, Frankie Lyman was 13 years old, but many of them were 14, 15, 16 years old. And I think that's why maybe you were able to record them today, because a lot of them are still alive because they started so early and so young.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, they're all in their 70s or 80s, and they are. It's just amazing. You go back and you look at footage, that we include in the film, or if you see on YouTube, of Lala Brooks of the Crystals, and Lala's 14 years old, and she's just this beautiful young girl. She's a beautiful woman today, but you just see this little girl up on stage just killing this audience at 14, 15 years old. It really is remarkable to see and to hear, and you're absolutely right, Jen. These were just kids, and I think that in the film, we cleared, I want to say 32 songs for the film, and of those 32 songs, I'd say 29 or 30 of them were recorded by teenagers, which is just remarkable when you think about it.
It is amazing. That is amazing. Sue, tell me a little. I really thought this was interesting. The origins of the song Yakety Yak. Because I thought this was funny.
Yeah, it was great. And we do one of those things where, as you do these films, and you start to go down a path, you realize that you have to kind of divert a little bit, because it would be impossible to tell a story without not telling a story. And so, as we're doing a piece on the Coasters, which was just one of the originators and one of the most popular groups at the time, we started to talk a little bit about Lieber and Stoller, the very famous songwriters, and the impact that Lieber and Stoller had in writing these songs. And they would write these songs every day. It was, you'd go in and sit down and write your songs, and that was a job. And you're right. There's a great story in the film where the Coasters are in the studio and they're talking about, what they want to do. And I think it's Stoller who, tells one of the guys in the Coasters, it's like, man, all you do is just yak, yak, yak. And no, I don't talk too much. And the next day, they come into the studio, and Lieber and Stoller had written the song Yakety Yak. And it was just born out of that kind of environment, where you just just throwing it up there and seeing what sticks.
I love it. I love it. And then that was a big hit. Yakety Yak.
Yeah, a huge hit that everybody loves. And yeah, it's like, hey, you guys just yak too much.
That's so funny. Tell me a little bit I can't remember the woman's name, but she was Jewish. It's early on. Was it Shirley? And did she write songs? Did she end up being like a producer for one of the early African-American groups, black groups? Do you remember that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a group that's the Orioles.
The Orioles.
The Orioles. That was, the Orioles were. This was one of the first groups, and just backing up just a little bit, is that the Orioles were one of the first crossovers where, at this time you're starting to get a little more earthy sound. You know what I mean? You're starting to get a little more of a blues sound. Up until this point had been very pretty, and the Orioles were. We spent a lot of time talking about the Orioles because this really was one of the first where it just started to sound like, okay, this isn't an African American singing. You know what I mean? This is not somebody trying to sound white. And they were managed by a 25-year-old Jewish girl named Deborah Chesler, and which was just, at that time, just unheard of that a white girl would manage a group. And Deborah Chesler was a songwriter, and at 25 years old, she wrote some amazing music that, became number one hits for the Orioles, and then was managing this group at a time when certainly no woman was doing it, and certainly, not a white woman, 5 African Americans touring around the country. And but Deborah Chesler, she said, was Jewish, and she understood racism. She understood what it was to be denied. And I think she identified with the African American experience that way as a Jewish woman, and she felt that, and she loved this music, and they loved her song, and they took her songs and really helped kind of bridge that gap. And lead singer of the Orioles, Sonny Till, he was that first to give you that really kind of earthy song, that earthy sound, and he had a huge influence on Elvis. If you'll go back and you can hear the Orioles singing "Crying in the Chapel," and then if you hear Elvis's version of "Crying in the Chapel," and Elvis did a gospel album and redid "Crying in the Chapel," and it'll sound just like Sonny Till. You'll definitely see the comparison. But yeah, you're right. Deborah Chesler was a true pioneer, and certainly someone who's been overlooked in the history books.
She really was a pioneer. We've got another clip. Can you lead us into what we're going to be listening to next?
Yep, absolutely. This is again a clip from the film, and this is Leon Hughes of the Coasters, and Brian McKnight, Anthony Gordine, Little Anthony, and Fred Paris. And this just talking about the motivation of what it was to and why you did this. And as is the case, I think, with most young teenage boys, it was all about the girls. So this was
when you're singing those sweet love songs like that on the street corners, there were girls always around. All right. And that was and
that's what.
That was it.
That's what you.
I put my baseball glove down, my bat down.
Everything.
This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
But the main thing was all the girls used to come to the best group. And we were the best group. Over the harp tones and the moon glows, we was the best group. They used to come and crowd and load up our corner, and that's the most marvelous, excuse me, white, this is my younger days.
We wanted attention, and that was the easiest way to get attention.
Well, it was because of the girls. All the fellas wanted a girl. So.
That was the coolest thing in the world, that you didn't need a band. You didn't need anything, that you and your friends could go on a street corner and sing, and girls would like that. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal.
And remember to keep your precious love.
So that was the beginning of that evolution. I went from the street corner to the subways and the hallways of Brooklyn. And you remember, as we keep doing this, we're getting better and better and better at our craft.
It wasn't thought that we would eventually go on to be professional. It was just the fact that we were enjoying ourselves.
As long as I had a street light or a bunch of guys together standing on the corner, on the stoop, it didn't matter. For me, it was the inner city urban sound. For me, it was camaraderie. It was achievement. It was a coming together of a bunch of guys singing their hearts out, making harmony together.
Of the
You are listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM, and like The Jan Price Show on Facebook, and check out thejanpriceshow.com. The Century Theater at Northridge Mall is newly remodeled with luxury loungers. Luxury loungers are electric-powered, oversized plush reclining seats with extendable footrests, cup holders, and snack tables. Reserve the best seat in town at the Century Theater at Northridge Mall.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right. It's Mr. Sandless, the no-sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476. Or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Brent Wilson, who's the producer, director, and writer of Street Light Harmonies. Brent, can you a couple stories? I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but there was a story that I really thought was kind of interesting. Again, to go back to the segregated South, and it was about the black and white fountains, saying that black people had to drink out of a certain fountain and a white person had to drink out of a different fountain. Do you want to share that story? Because I just thought that was so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those moments in the film where, when you're doing it, you know that you have that moment that kind of encapsulates this story, because obviously it's such a big story and worthy of 10 films. But Charlie Thomas of the Drifters, who is just a legend, of course, and a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member, and just a great personality. And we're talking about the South, and he tells this great story where they're on tour down somewhere in Georgia, and they're driving around in their bus, and he had a white bus driver and a guy named Little Willie, and they stop off someplace, and Little Willie goes, "Come here, Charlie, I've got an idea." And they walk over to the water fountains, and the water fountains are marked. One says white, the other one says black, and Little Willie goes, "I'm going to drink out of the black fountain, Charlie, and you drink out of the white fountain." And so they both take a real quick sip. He asked him, "How did that taste, Charlie?" And he goes, "That tasted like water." "How did that taste to you, Willie?" "Tasted like water to me." And at the end, I thought, what, that just encapsulates the craziness of all of it. It just tasted like water. And
it's a great
and
story.
Charlie just tells the story with the same kind of just look of craziness of like, yep, we both just took a sip of water.
Yes.
And it tasted like water.
It's a great little piece in the film. It really is. What was the most difficult part of making this movie?
I would say it was probably just tracking down these artists. And I have to give credit to Teresa Page, their producer. Teresa just was turning over every stone to try to find these guys and find these girls. I mean, it's, a lot of them, of course, don't have emails, and some of them still perform, but, most of them have long retired. And so it just kind of became this puzzle, a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing, and just trying to kind of piece it all together. And, one humorous story that didn't end humorously, but at the time it was very funny, but we really wanted to get Ben E. King for the documentary. And so Teresa was calling and this is, Ben E. King. And this just expresses, I think, how difficult this was of a job for Teresa. Is it's still Ben E. King. We've had, Stand By Me was number one in the 1960s, and it was number one in the 1980s. And it's one of the most popular songs in the world. He was still touring, and we can't track down Ben E. King. We keep calling, and she calls the office, and she calls the manager, and she's got these emails that she thinks from friends of friends. friends to be able to get a hold of him, and we're just not getting a hold of him. So finally she says, you know what, there's a fax number on the answering machine. This is 2 years ago. And she goes, you know what, I'll try a fax. So she sends a fax, and Benny King returns the phone call the very next day.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow.
So it's that kind of, it was just that kind of craziness to try to track them down. And I would say that was probably the most difficult part, was just trying to get these artists and to let them know that our intentions were real and that we were sincere about doing that. And, as you can imagine, a lot of them had some skepticism, like, who are these guys? Are you going to try to rip me off? What's your angle?
Oh, wow. You did went through that. Wow.
Yeah. They're still gun shy.
Right.
They're still very much gun shy. And I think, one of the things that I was very proud of is that by the time we finished these interviews, Teresa and Tim and I, we made friends for life. We had met people that trusted us, and we gained their trust. I think we went into these things, and in each one of these interviews, with them, with the artists being skeptical, and I think by the time the whole process was done, we had gained their trust and their friendship. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of. When we premiered at Doc NYC back in November, it was the first time that we had seen, these artists since their interviews. We'd spoken with them and things like that, but it was the first time we'd seen them, and to be able to hug those and get those hugs and see those smiles was just a very, very special night, a very special feeling.
Yeah. Did most of them still live back east, back in New York area?
Yeah, we did. We kind of split it into two. We did a big, heavy East Coast one, and then a West Coast. I would say probably 75%. Yeah, is definitely East Coast. Between Virginia and then New Jersey and Long Island, and then a little bit of New York. But yeah, everybody for the most part stayed there on the East Coast.
In the East Coast.
Yeah.
Well, you had one of our neighbors here locally. Al Jardine is in the film. He lives in Big Sur, and I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times, and it was fun to see him in the movie.
Oh, yeah, Al. We just absolutely love Al, and it was a fantastic interview, and just a wonderful gentleman. And Brent Wilson, Brian's in the film as well, and that was a big step. That's a big step in that evolution. The Beach Boys played a really important role in evolving this music. Because what happens is this music is going along, and then it starts to evolve. And with the Beach Boys, one of the very first steps, if you listen to Surfing, you'll hear that ba ba dip dip. You'll hear that in the background of that song, and that's doo-wop. And it sort of came evolving, and then right after that, of course, the Beatles came, and the Beatles just absolutely killed this music. It killed the black music. It killed that sound, and it became all about the Beatles. But the Beach Boys were the only ones who were able to kind of hold them off at that particular time and make harmonies popular and keep harmonies alive and that role, that link in the chain is pivotal. And having Al and Brian and the Doc was just a real pleasure.
Yeah.
And a real treat. And you're right, Al's just as sweet a man as they come. And interviewing Brian was just one of those moments when you're sitting down and you're looking at history.
Right.
You look at history in the eyes.
And geniuses too. So we have another. What do we have coming up? We have another clip from the movie or some music. What's the next clip we have, Brent?
This is a clip that goes back to, I think we were talking a little earlier about the South and what it was like to play in the South. And this is Fred Parris of the Five Satins, Terry Johnson of the Flamingos, Lois Powell, and Lala Brooks of the Crystals. And the song is Will the Circle Be Unbroken by the Staples Singers. And it deals with the issues that these artists faced in the South.
It was a lot of fun. It was all brand new to us. The South was different. The South was a lot different. It wasn't as much fun.
I was standing by my window on a cold and cloudy day.
I'll never forget Birmingham, Alabama. It was scary. It was a scary time in my life.
During 1959, we did a 6-week tour of one-nighters in the South. And that was a mind-boggling and eye-opening situation for all of us.
We would see people outside, sticks, guns. Better not get off that bus, boy. It was a heck of a time, man.
We knew what we were reading in the papers. We heard it on the news. We saw things on TV about what was happening in the South, but we really didn't have a clue.
To play the South was it was hard for me as a teenager, as a young teenager. I don't know about the other girls because they were 18 and maybe they were more mature than I was. I wasn't as mature to understand racism, and I was angry.
Rough, man. Some of it was rough, you know. We had to go to the back room. Going to the South, we had to go to the back room to eat. We couldn't sit down and rest around. They wouldn't serve you. They wouldn't serve you back then.
You are listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like The Jan Price Show on Facebook and check out thejanpriceshow.com. The Ozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Ozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Ozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.
Have you ever dreamed of doing commercials or movies? Your dream starts with a desire. And if you have the desire to do commercials and feature films, we want to know about you. We're Moco Film, one of the Genesis companies that includes VoiceJock, a major provider of TV commercial talent to TV stations throughout the nation. Registering is free. Just go to mocofilm.com and fill out the information. That's MOCOfilm.com. You'll become part of a large talent bank available to producers. Go to mocofilm.com today and start living your dream.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Brent Wilson, who's the producer, director, and writer of Street Light Harmonies. And we only have a minute or so left, Brent. Before we go, I want to, where can people see this movie? Are you going to other film festivals, or do you have a website that they can go to?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Jan. Yeah, if you could go to streetlightharmonies.com. You can find Streetlight Harmonies on Facebook as well, and we'll keep posting information on our future screenings and future festivals. I know we're going to be doing the Florida Film Festival in April, and then a few other festivals beyond that. And then, and we're working on distribution now to be able to get it out there wider. We'll certainly be announcing that on our website and on Facebook when that becomes available.
I can't wait. Everybody should see this movie. It is so much fun. It is just, it's so well done. It's beautifully edited. I love the way you do the older clips and the newer, and just the blend of newer artists with the older artists. And it's a beautiful, fun movie. And I highly recommend seeing Streetlight Harmonies. Thank you, Brent, for being with us. We're going to do the outro with the music. So you just want to set it up real fast?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you, Jan, for having me on and for this. And this last clip is we re-recorded with Lala Brooks of the Crystals, Charlie Thomas of the Drifters, and Vito Pacone of the Elegant, with the vocal harmony group Straight No Chaser, and we re-recorded Stand By Me as what we felt was a metaphor for not only just the film itself, but for these artists. And so this is a re-recording of that classic song.
Wonderful. You have been listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. Like The Jan Price Show on Facebook, and check out thejanpriceshow.com.